Creators, talent managers, listeners, we are back with another episode to start your 2025 in the right way. So welcome back to the Lifting the Lid. Obviously, season 1 of Lifting the Lid has wrapped, but we couldn't send you in to 2025 without some serious goal-setting, vision boarding advice from the goal-setting guru herself, Alice Benham.
Honoured to be given such a title. Thank you.
Of course, you're so welcome. And thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I was saying before we hit record, I feel like I am currently lifting the lid on Lifting the Lid because I'm one of your most loyal listeners and, you know, it's very fun to see the behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I've been on Alice's podcast.
Yes.
And I am equally as big a fan of your podcast. So there has where was it that we were listening to each other's? I feel like on multiple occasions we've bumped into each other whilst listening to each other's podcasts.
Yes, it's very creepy. You got in my car the other week when I was picking you up from the station, and as I pressed go on my car, as I turned it on, it's not a go-kart. As I turned the car on, it was just your vlog came up, and I was like, this is so embarrassing. I'm so sorry. So I am a true fan.
And the same, I was with Alice for an event, and I got into my car after the event with Alice, and immediately her podcast just pops on. And to be honest, that happens most times I get into the car because I'm already playing your podcast. So if you haven't already, definitely go and listen to Alice's podcast because it's so good. And it's just, you're just a fountain of knowledge.
I appreciate that. You know, when you speak things and you're like, does this make any sense?
Yes.
And you never know. So it's always nice when other people say, I hear you. It's good vibes.
Okay, I feel like anytime I do an introduction, I sort of butcher it. So I feel like I'd love if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us a little bit about your journey and what it is that you do.
Yes, I don't know that I'll butcher it any less than you would. It's like the worst thing, isn't it, when someone's like, so I was at an event the other day and they were like, can you pitch yourself in 15 seconds? And I was like, absolutely not. I think I just spent 15 seconds being like, hiya, bye. I'm Alice Benham. If people haven't met me before, lots of people call me AB or Alice, but I'll answer to anything. I stepped into the world of business when I was 17. I quit school when I was 16 to manage a Christmas grotto, which is as chaotic as it sounds. I was a bit done with the school system and just wanted to get out and do stuff. So I quit school for that job. And then within a year, quit that to be a freelancer, not knowing what freelancing meant. I became a business owner quite accidentally when I was 17. My kind of, I guess, career history or business evolution from then has been a lot. I've run the same business, but obviously it's looked very different over the years. So I started out as kind of a marketing freelancer, then moved into marketing strategy. I then trained in business strategy, and kind of for the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say I've been doing the same thing, which is helping business owners grow. I know that can sound really kind of vague and lofty, but really helping people to cast vision, map out the strategies that are going to get them there, basically trying to get people to think a little bit more like business owners and kind of step into that CEO role is what I do. So I do a lot of consulting. I do event speaking. I've got a podcast. I've got a stationery shop. I run retreats. So there's quite a few things that happen under that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And I am an Alice Benham customer. I'm trying to remember how we actually met, and I think it might have just been we're just online friends.
Yeah, I remember you messaged me like, do you want to go for a coffee in Gales? And I nearly lost, can I swear on this podcast? Yeah. I nearly lost my shit because I was like, that's Verity. I was like, she's such a big deal. I remember thinking like, she looks so familiar. You must get this a lot, it probably gets really annoying. But I was like, she looks so familiar, and I was like, oh my God. It's the Gleam woman. She knew all those people. I used to watch her in the Christmas party vlogs. So I remember feeling a bit of a fangirl when we first met, and then I was very relieved to have somehow snuck the fangirling under the radar. And then you came on my podcast, and I feel like the rest was history.
Yeah, so it was me. So I invited you for a coffee.
Yeah.
We went for a coffee, then I went on your podcast, and then I think you very kindly invited me to your 2024, what do you call it? A goal setting workshop? I can't remember what it's called.
Yes, I think that the one at the start of the year is always like the year strategy. So yeah, that was our 2024 in-person full day. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Can I say that about my own thing? It was great vibes.
You definitely can and should.
Thank you.
It was so good. So after that session, I went away and I added all of my notes of the whole session to a board, basically, the system that we use. But wrote down all of the individual notes. We did loads of really cool exercises there. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get that up and we're going to go through it and see whether Alice has helped me achieve my 2024 goals.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
It's like I'm getting a live review. I love it. Because normally I just help people to set the goals and then I kind of skedaddle. So
No, that's not true.
True.
You come. So then Alice does quarterly sessions where we reflect on the goals.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so amazing about what you do, that you don't just set the goal. I think you're being humble there.
Oh, I appreciate that. I guess I'm not in people's day to day.
Of course.
I feel like I get the best of both worlds with my job, because I get to do all this exciting work with people and then I don't have to do any of it.
True.
And then 3 months later, I'm like, how did it go? Yay for the wins. Woo.
Yes.
Okay, what are your next goals?
And also people feel in a way grateful to you for helping them achieve those things.
Yeah, I'm like, I've done nothing.
Yeah, but you have.
Professional yapper, that's me.
We'll go on to look at the goals that I set later and whether I've achieved them or not with Alice's help. So because I loved working with Alice so much, we actually, at the end of 2024, we did a goal setting workshop with Team TBH. And at the beginning of January, we're going to do a goal setting workshop with our roster as well, an online one. And this is how much I love the power of Alice Benham and her goal setting workshops.
You can't get rid of me at this time of year.
I can't. I'm like myself, the team, the talent, and obviously the podcast as well. I felt everyone needs your advice and vision.
I appreciate that. And I'm glad to have conversations like this, because I feel like this time of year can get really noisy, and I'm so anti setting goals for the sake of it. I'm a big advocate for, if you're going to do it right. So hopefully we can make sure people don't waste their time goal setting in the wrong way at the start of the year, but do it well.
Yeah, as you say, it's so important to set kind of intentional goals and be really clear about how that connects to your vision. But if I am a creator right now, it's the start of January. Firstly, why is it so important for me to set goals?
Good question. Because like I said, I think if you're not going to do it with intention, it's just a waste of time. I say that with love, but whenever I do my workshops, I'll always say to people, look, unless you're going to do it in an intentional way, I would way rather you just spend this time watching TV or listening to a fun podcast or going on a walk or something, because your time is precious and we don't need goals. I think that's the important place to begin, is so many of us will have succeeded and grown in our work without goals in place. I think back to seasons in my business or clients that I've worked with where they haven't had this approach to goal setting and they've still grown. So it's worth noting, we don't need them. But the role of a goal, I think, is to help you move forwards in a way that has more intention, more ease, and ideally in less time. So those are kind of the three things that I think about, is that having a goal helps you to be more intentional, so you cut out the noise and you know exactly where you're going. Allows you to do things with more ease, so you're not doing things that aren't right for you, you're not questioning the plan, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel all the time, and then you do it in less time. So because of those two factors, you're not faffing, you're not overcomplicating things, you're not waiting to take action, you're doing the right stuff as quick as you can, so you move towards your big picture vision in a more intentional way. That's really, to me, the point of goals. You will probably achieve success without a goal, but if you have goals in place, you're likely going to achieve that success with more ease, more intention, in less time.
Yeah, and I also think one of the things I really got from the 2024 workshop was stepping away and thinking about, I'm not sure the way to put this, but are your goals authentic to you? Something that I figured out in the 2024 goal setting workshop that we did was some of the things that I was sort of somehow heading towards weren't actually authentic to what I wanted. And I was sort of just on a bit of a treadmill and doing things, I guess, reactively, rather than thinking, is this aligned with the life that I actually want to lead?
And you've touched on, though, I think the biggest mistake people make with goal setting, which is setting goals without that bigger vision in place. The way I see it is that a goal is not the destination. A goal is a vehicle to move you towards that. So your goal shouldn't really be what you really care about. They should be the things that you're going to do to get towards the things that you care about. They should be tangible. They should be actionable. So a lot of people make that mistake. January 1st, they sit down to write goals, and what they're really writing is their vision, or they're just writing ideas. And actually, I think there's a really important first step, as you've noted there, which is actually, where do we want to go, so we can make sure we're setting goals that actually align with that.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than chasing something that isn't quite right for you, because that's wasted time and energy. It's frustrating. And you do it and then go, oh, that felt a bit empty, because it wasn't actually aligned with where you wanted to get to.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I'm a creator. It's January. What are the first 3 things that I need to do to set intentional goals for 2025?
You're clearly a good student of the method, because there are 3 steps. So she's there, she's ready, she knows. First step is all about vision, as we were just talking about there. So people can do this in whatever way they want to, but the way I see work around vision is that it's really just about piecing together as much of the puzzle as you can around where you want to be in the long term. I think when people talk about vision, there can be this fear that we have to have this like crystal clear, where are you going to be in 5 years? And even as someone who does this work, I don't really know where my business is going to be in 2 years even. I think what I would say about vision is it's all about just getting as much clarity as you can and allowing that sometimes to be a little bit more qualitative. So for creators, thinking about things like, how would you like your work to feel? What would you like to be getting from your career? What would you like to be known for? Even getting granular, you know, what would you like your day-to-day to look like? What would you like your job role to be? What would you like your lifestyle to be like? Like all of these questions that just help you to understand what's important to me. You know, one of my favorite questions to ask people when we're setting vision, if you're doing it for the year, is to think, right, if at the end of the year, I deemed my work a success, what would that look like? You know, I quite like a little visualization. So sometimes I'll imagine me in December doing my end of year review. And I imagine myself sat there going, yes, we did it. And then I try and think, okay, what would be true for her to say that? If I were to meet the me of the future and she were to say we did it, what does that mean? And that doesn't have to be about things, like I said, being super tangible or even having a time frame. It's almost just casting that vision as far ahead as you can. And the most important thing with that first step is letting it be your vision. As you said, not listening to the shoulds, which I feel like in the creative space probably get quite loud. Yeah. I should be doing this thing. I should be building my business in that way. I should be growing in this direction. You've got to give yourself a massive permission slip to connect to your vision. Yeah. What's important to you. So that I'd say is really the first step.
And what is the balance between that big picture thinking and thinking big, between like the actually making it happen and not, you know, setting completely lofty, unrealistic expectations of yourself?
Often unrealistic vision is not about where you want to be, it's the time frame you're expecting to get there in. We've probably all heard that quote of like, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And I really believe that's true. As people that run businesses, as people that are self-employed, we sometimes think, okay, that's my vision. Well, I have to be there by the end of the year. And then what we do actually in doing that is we give ourselves a bit of a get out jail free card, because we go, well, I can't be there in a year, so I won't do it. So I can't do it. And it's like, actually, you probably could be there in 3 years or in 5 years. Or hey, maybe in 5 years you have a new vision, but you'll have moved towards it. So that's why I quite like the vision being vague in terms of the detail, but also vague in terms of the timeline. It's almost this kind of North Star that we're heading towards, rather than this binary, like I have to be here by the end of the year to be deemed a success. It's less that and more just, this is what I think I want to move towards. And then as you move towards it, it will get clearer. But I think in terms of vision, however big your brain will let you go. Yeah. Go for it, as long as it feels exciting to you. That's why I always say to people when I do this work to them, is when they share their vision, I'm noticing how are they speaking, what's their body language. You know, don't have this lofty vision just because that's what your mate has. Whatever your definition of success and excitement looks like, I think let it be that, but be open that it might need to take longer than your brain wants it to.
Yeah. And I think like for me, a trouble I've had is that bigger thinking. I think big, but I think I'm also very like realistic, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to set things that I don't achieve, or I don't have a really clear path to achieve. But that's one thing I really got from the workshop. So there was one exercise you did, I don't know if we can share it. Like,
yeah.
One exercise you did with us, and it's such a simple thing, but it's so effective, I think. And it's what I like when we went on the workshop with the girls, I was like, you have to do this with them, because it really spoke to me, and it may do to like the lifting the lid listeners as well. But it was, wouldn't it be cool if, and you have to write 25 things, or like however many in like a certain amount of time, allowing yourself to think bigger and just think in your head, like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, it doesn't need to be possible. It doesn't need to be possible in a certain amount of time, but what's coming up for me? And I found so much stuff came up for me that I didn't even realize was there.
Yes.
And I just thought that was such a good exercise that you did with us. And it really helped me to think bigger without putting the kind of like expectation on myself that it had to be possible in a certain amount of time.
That's completely it. It's bringing in that feeling of playfulness. You know, I think that the difficulty of working for yourself is you kind of have to be about 12 job roles in one. And when we're setting goals, we are actually switching modes. You know, this first step of vision, we've got to be playful. We've got to be full of self-belief. We've got to be almost stepping into that like what if CEO optimistic mode. When we then get to steps 2 and 3 and we think more about the practical, that's where that mindset you're speaking about, where we're more like, what is possible and what can we do? That brain is needed, but we almost have to, I think, learn to like put that brain on the shelf and be like, no, when I'm casting vision, let's be playful. Let's just dream, because that's ultimately what we're doing. And it's not putting pressure on, like you said, it's just going, wouldn't it be cool if? And I love what you said there, and this happens for most people, is things come to the surface that you don't even know you care about or you want. And what I love about those lists, I've done that for maybe 8 years now in my business, is I've got these hundreds of things that I can then go back and be like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool if I did that?
Yeah.
And I already did. And then some things I look back at and I'm like, yeah, don't know why we wanted that. Why that wasn't relevant. But that's not the point. I think we've got to get over, when we're doing vision and goal setting, we're not deciding, am I a success or am I a failure if I've done these things or not? We're just getting more clarity. That's always a positive thing, I think.
Okay, so we've done step 1 and we've yapped a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's do step 2. What is the next step? I'm a creator. It's 2025. What do I need to do?
So you've got your vision set, and it's probably worth saying exercises like wouldn't it be cool if are great, but what you want to make sure you then do is almost conclude your vision. So the way I recommend people do this is set some yearly intentions. So it's almost like your kind of vision for the year summed up. So once you've got those yearly intentions, and I personally recommend 3, I feel like 3 is a nice balance. So you've kind of summed up, okay, these 3 things are important to me. So maybe it's going to be like, the first thing is about maybe growing your profit and your revenue. Maybe the second thing is about pivoting what you're known for. And maybe the third thing is about operations and freedom and flexibility. So you've kind of summed up, okay, these are the 3 things that are important to me this year. Now we're going to set your goals. And I would recommend setting quarterly goals. So you set them through a 3-month time period. And as I said earlier, goals are not the destination. They are a step towards that destination. So it might be a weird example, but if your vision was, I want to go to Australia, your goal wouldn't be go to Australia. Your goal would be plan the trip. Goal number 2 would be save up the money. Goal number 3 would be pack your bags. Goal number 4 would be get to the airport. So you can see how your goals are kind of these tangible, actionable steps towards the vision. So what you want to do each quarter is sit down and go, right, obviously at the start of the year, you haven't moved towards your vision at all yet. So it's a blank slate. What is my first step in the next 3 months to moving towards that bigger vision? So if one of the vision pieces that you have is perhaps pivoting your brand and what you're known for, maybe you know that that's something that's important to you in the long term. Maybe one of your goals for Q1 is experiment with X new content pillar, or be consistent with strategy on other platform, whatever it might be. So you can see in those examples, they're really tangible. Your goals should be actionable. If your goals are vague, they're going to be really hard to action, and it's action that actually achieves a goal. So it needs to be really tangible and also link to the bigger vision. Here is where we need to really remember to remove the shoulds. And our brain might be going, oh, but maybe we want to start a podcast. And then we've got to go, okay, but is that actually going to move us towards the vision? We don't want to be just doing more. We want to be doing what matters. So yeah, we think about setting these quarterly goals. And the other rule of thumb I give people is set goals that stretch you but don't stress you. We are often too ambitious with what we can achieve in 3 months. It actually goes really quickly and life happens. You want to be a bit pessimistic and think, okay, what could I achieve? You know, if things were to get busy, if life were to happen. We don't want to be too optimistic, because then you just set yourself up to get frustrated and disappointed and not take action. So yeah, we set those quarterly goals, and that's kind of the middle step of our method.
And another thing I think really like struck a chord with me when we were doing the workshops, and when I do the quarterly workshops with you, was the way you were like, okay, these are your goals, but what have you got going on in life in the next 3 months? And you sort of just touched on it there, but like, it made me feel less, I guess, guilty at myself, or like angry at myself for not being able to, you know, do X, Y, Z, and like you said, would like achieve all of my goals in the next 3 months. It gave me, you always use the term, but a permission slip to be like, okay, no, life has to happen as well. Like last year, for example, like I was turning 30 and like various things were happening in my life. And like I was going away with my family, for example, and I wanted to be really present there. And therefore, like I wasn't going to be pushing my goals, because actually spending time with my family is a really authentic and important thing for me. And I'm sure it is lots of people. But it sort of made me, I don't know, just give myself, feel a bit of empathy and understanding towards myself that like, okay, life has to happen as well.
Completely. That's what it needs to be about. When we're over ambitious, i.e. when we set goals that don't have our capacity in mind, it's actually really cruel to ourselves because we're basically saying like, hey, you don't have the capacity to do this, but we're going to lord this over you for the next 3 months. And then all you're going to feel is guilt, disappointment, frustration. And you're probably then not going to take the action. Actually, a lot of the time when we're more realistic, we take more action, we get more momentum. And then I always remind people, you can always do more. You know, if I'm setting goals with someone, and I'm often like the Debbie Downer that's like, okay, let's maybe make that goal a bit smaller, or let's maybe stretch it out over a couple of quarters. So let's just set like a half goal. And then they'll kind of be like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, but if you did it sooner, you can set the goal again. Like no one's stopping you from doing that. But it's exactly as you said, just being realistic with yourself and knowing that we all work in seasons. Like our productivity and our output across the year is going to vary. You know, we're not built to be constantly delivering at the same high level. I know that for me, Q4, like end of the year is big push time. I then know that for me, like the summer is a really quiet period. So my Q3 goals are actually always very, very small. Sometimes I don't even set them. So yeah, big permission slip to just think about what do you actually have capacity for and then set goals with that in mind. It's a lot kinder to yourself and you'll see more growth as a result. It feels backwards, but it's not.
So number 1 is vision.
Yeah.
Number 2 is goals.
Correct.
What's number 3?
It's the big one, and it's the one that I think we don't always think about when we're doing this work, which is action. You know, if I were to get any word tattooed on me, I'd probably get the word action. I've got enough words tattooed on me that I regret, so I'm not going to do that. But if I were to get another tattoo, it probably would be something around this word of action, because it's the thing that I think everything comes back to. You know, my job is doing a lot of work around the vision, around the goals, but ultimately, if people don't take action, that is all just a complete waste of time. And that is said with complete love and compassion. Action is the only thing that will create change in your work, in your life, in whatever area you're applying this to. So I think we've really got to consider not just what action are you going to take, but how are you going to support yourself in taking action. So yes, great, you've got your quarterly goals. Okay, are they visible? How are you going to each day, each week, each month come back to them? How are you going to track your progress? How are you going to give yourself an opportunity to figure out even what action you're going to take? Do you need someone to help you? You know, I think so often we're fired up because we've set these goals. We've done step 1 and 2, and then we think that energy and that momentum is enough. And it's not, right? Like motivation is fleeting. And so you don't just want to set the goals and think, oh, I'll figure it out. You really want to carefully consider what action am I going to take over the next 3 months and how? Because as you said, life happens. We're not always going to have 2 hours a day magically presented to us to achieve our goals. So we've really got to consider, how do we break it down and how do we help ourselves to take the action?
And what would you think is the key consideration for someone who wants to do that? Like, what do they really have to think about? How do they have to, how can I make sure I take action?
A lot of people's challenges with action are because they've not done those first 2 steps correctly. So if you've done those first 2 steps and you've got goals that are tangible and actionable and actually aligned for you, I would say the biggest habit to build is a moment where you come back to the goals. I started a stationery brand on paper a few years ago, and it was born out of this need to keep your goals visible, because what so many people do, and the listeners might resonate as I say this, is they go in January to a coffee shop with a nice new notebook, they write goals, and then they shut that notebook and find it about 4 years later. And then they're like, oh.
Producer Sophia looks like she's being accused of something.
We've all done it, right? But if you shut your goals in a notebook, what that's doing is it's basically meaning that you have to, you know, remember them all of the time. And that's just not realistic. So I personally love setting them as my laptop background. Can't avoid them, always going to be there. You can build yourself like a hub to track them, like you do, Verity. You can put them on your wall, but have a moment I would recommend in your week where you come back to your goals. So I have a few habits that I do every Monday morning. And one of those habits is to just look at my goals. Some weeks I look at them and go, okay, cool. Don't really have much capacity to move towards these this week. So that's all good. But some weeks I'm like, oh, I really needed to check back in and figure out what am I going to do this week to move towards my goals. Growth is actually very simple. It's just working out how do you do something today that aligns with where you want to be by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. In theory, that's very simple. In practice, we've got to really build that habit to make sure we're actually sitting back and going, oh, what am I doing? Because it's so easy to be in the in, isn't it? And just forget what the goals are.
It absolutely is. I think like I definitely could do that more. I do have one check-in point once a month where I will check in and see where I'm at with my goals and move a few things around and like more often than not, things take longer than I'd anticipated, or like I have to change my goal a little bit because it actually no longer feels aligned, or whatever else. But yeah, I've got my goal tracker, which I think you think is maybe a lot more sophisticated than it is. But it's just so good for me to keep track of even the like other exercises that we did, so I can see where my mindset was at that time, and also check in each quarter with my vision. And actually my vision tends to stay the same, I find, because I guess it was only set in 2024 of January 2024, but it's a much bigger picture thing. Like my goals will change in a way, but my vision will stay the same.
Yeah, completely that. It's like, you know where you want to go, how you're going to get there is always up for debate. That's how I see it. And that's why your goals shouldn't be what are important to you. I look at my goals for Q1 and I don't necessarily like jump out of bed at the thought of them, because they're quite like practical, tangible, boring things. It's not the goal that matters, it's where the goal is going to get you. So absolutely don't get too attached to the goals, but keep bringing it back to that vision. And I think especially in the creator space, that's needed more than ever, because the need to evolve and adapt to changes is so important, right? You can't be too rigid, because in 6 months you could need a completely new strategy.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important note for creators, is like, let it evolve. Because if anything, that will help you stay relevant and all the other things.
Absolutely. And I think like also an important note for creators is authenticity of those goals. So like it's all about carving your own path. I think it is so easy, like we say, to look at your competitors and try and do something similar, but actually it's your authenticity as a creator that, and I'm sorry that word is so icky and annoying, but like it is that, are you being authentic to yourself and your values and your mission? And if you are, you will be able to come back to it day in, day out, and like move and do the things you need to do to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, it's actually really odd how aware business owners and creators are of what everyone in their space is doing. You think of other industries, people don't have that constant view. And so I think, yeah, you've got to almost put the blinkers on and ignore what other people are up to and really just like let it be your plan. Yeah. And let it be what you're doing.
And that's been a big one even for me this year. But I think like one thing that's just come to my head actually is probably differentiating between this and actually what we do as managers for strategies. Because I think like there's definitely similarities between this and with our creative strategies. We also do like quarterly check-ins and we break it all down into actions and stuff. And like majority of the time things will change and we'll move things around and actually that's no longer relevant anymore, etc. I guess this is more about like what you want and like your vision and your mission, and then that is obviously tied to strategy in a lot of ways. However, what we do in our strategies with our talent is we break down kind of the data of like what has been before, and we kind of, and also we're looking at like what else is going on in the influencer industry and where creators are moving and kind of the trends and the predictions, etc. And then we tie in the creator strategy with the data, what is going on, and then we build strategy out from that with their goals as well.
Yes. And I think the two probably work together, don't they? Because if the creators have got that vision, it's almost like the strategy you guys are doing is almost all of the like the detail and the how. So someone might set a goal of like, okay, I really want to diversify the work that I do as a creator. But obviously that's just then, you know, a thing. It's like, what does that mean? And then that's where you guys come in with so much expertise, is like, okay, how could you diversify and what you're going to need to do to get there? And what are other people in your space doing that? So I think the two probably work hand in hand, because I'd imagine if a creator comes to you and they're kind of like, I don't really know what I want. And you're like, okay, do we just make you like more money then? Like there's not really any vision other than that.
That is exactly what I was about to say. I was like, this is why I think this work is so important and why I want all of our creators to do it, because what I think was so important for me in doing it was connecting with my authentic vision and mission and why. And I can use, like, obviously build a business plan out to the bottom of that to make those things happen, but like it needs to be connected to my why. And it's the same with the creators. Like it's so important that their strategies are based on what they truly want, because otherwise you're moving in a direction of something that's not aligned or authentic again.
Completely. And I think it's hard to imagine this is true until you've been through it. I remember hearing someone say this when I was early on in my business. I was like, no, that can't be true. What a lovely problem to have. But it is true that if you can achieve quote unquote success, i.e. more money, more followers, more stuff. But if it isn't actually what you want, it doesn't fill the gap. It doesn't itch the scratch, however you want to see it. And so I think that's where vision is so key, because I've seen so many people, you know, get more and more and more, and then have this moment of going, oh, but this isn't the more that I wanted.
Yes.
And that's a really painful thing to realize. I think once it's that moving goalpost thing, isn't it? You get there and then realize, oh, this isn't actually what I wanted.
Absolutely. And I think that is definitely something that we've noticed with like creators, that like, you know, we can get so far, but then it has to be like that wider mission and purpose has to be fulfilled for the person to be happy. Obviously it is now January, and your big thing, your big mission is helping people work on their business, not in it.
Yeah.
What would you say are your key tips for creators about working on their business? And for me as well, like, it's so important. And I always encourage our creators and creators everywhere to think of themselves as business owners. And I think in the creator space and with lots of creators that I've worked with, there is maybe a hesitation of delegating and, you know, hiring editors and making that next step, which I think changes changes the mindset from being I'm a creator to I'm a business owner, but is also so important and great to kind of help you take that next step and grow and scale as a business.
Yeah.
What are your top tips for business owners or creators working on their business?
I love this question because I fully agree with that kind of message, like you said, of how important the on versus it is. I know when I've listened to this podcast before and you guys are talking about like encouraging people to set some working hours and bring in some structure, you know, it's all in that same vein, isn't it? Of like having that more intentional time of working on your business, not just in it. I think I see a lot business owners that feel like it's all happened quite accidentally, which maybe some creators might resonate with, where it's like, oh, it's just kind of a hobby that turned into a job, or like, oh, it's just kind of snowballed and happened. And I think there is that transition point where actually you've got to start thinking of it like a business in order to intentionally take it to that next level. I think of working on your business kind of like stepping into CEO mode, where you're going, actually, I'm going to start leading things. I'm going to intentionally decide where this is going and how it's changing. I'm done with the snowballing. I'm done with the, you know, just seeing what happens. And actually, I want to be more intentional now. So I think that the first tip I'd give is echoing what you've already said, which is you've got to see yourself as a business owner, start acting like one. Feels quite chicken and egg, doesn't it? Of like, oh, I wish I like acted a bit more like a business owner. And it's like, actually, you've got to see yourself as one first. So like whenever people join my programs, I send them a notebook that says on it business owner and then their name. And that's a really intentional thing from my part, because the second someone sees themselves as, oh, I'm just making it up, oh, it's just a hobby, or it's just a side hustle, nothing wrong with that language, but you got to watch how that then affects probably how you see yourself and the action you're going to take. So I think you've got to see yourself as a business owner, even if it feels a bit stretchy and a bit icky at first, even if it's just internal language. You don't have to go and tell other people that if that doesn't feel comfortable for you. I think the second thing is carving out time to do this work, you know, working in. So for creators, that's obviously going to be, you know, working with brands, negotiating, doing admin, creating content. It always feels more urgent. It's the stuff that pays the bills. It's the things that other people are asking of you. Working on doesn't matter to anyone other than you. And so you've got to keep it in mind that it's never going to feel urgent. So you have to prioritize it. So as you have Verity, you know, maybe it's having like a monthly checkpoint. I love the first Monday of every month. It's one of my habits. And actually what I've built a whole program around is helping people spend the first Monday of every month working on. So even if people have a habit of going to a coffee shop for 90 minutes on that first Monday, or whenever it can be for them, to just step back and have that kind of CEO time, have that kind of business owner time. And I think the third thing to think about is just take the action and kind of let the evidence follow. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think sometimes there can be this fear for people if they're maybe changing modes a bit, if they're like, oh, okay, this feels a bit stretchy, or as you said, maybe I'm looking to hire a team or bring in more structure and this feels a bit scary. I just think with everything, what's the worst that can happen? And you can give it a go and then decide that goal setting thing that Alice was chatting about isn't for me. I want to go back to how I was doing it before. And absolutely, if you try it and it's not for you, crack on. But I think just give it a go. Like, I love this work because, as you said, I get to see people see the effects of doing this work. And I have seen people genuinely change their lives and the lives of people around them because they have brought in that little bit more structure, because they've just thought, how do I take action that might get me closer to that vision? And I just think that's such an exciting thing that like we all have the control over where our careers go. It's just a question of whether you're going to take that control. So they're all capable of acting like business owners. It's just if you're going to put in the time and the work and the consistency needed, I think, to do that.
There's so much that you said there that I really want to like go into more detail on, but we're actually running out of time. But like even just that point around the CEO element and thinking of yourself as a CEO, I remember like that was like a really icky thing for me, which is it's crazy because I run a business, but like it was just like referring to myself as that. I felt like it was loftier, or like sounded more impressive than it should for me. And I guess it's all to do with imposter syndrome and how we're kind of taught to think a CEO should look. Well, although we have worn our suits today.
Yeah, true. We are in CEO mode, as
yeah,
they
we
say.
are. Girl boss. But yeah, I think it's stepping into that and like realizing that what we think a CEO can look like however we want it to look.
Yeah.
And like it's more about, I guess, stepping into that role.
Completely. It's a position of leadership. That's how I see it. Of just going like, I'm in charge here and I get to decide and I'm going to act like that.
Yeah. And I think that is like something that could be really valuable for creators. I think like that more and more now creators are becoming business owners and like managers in the management team where we're a pairing, where we are business partners.
Yeah.
And that's how I always describe it. We're business partners. So we bring the strategy, the data, the team, and you bring the content creation, and you can build a team doing that, and we can work together as partners, just like you would if you were a CEO and you brought on a co-founder, you know?
Completely.
So I think this is the year, 2026 is the year of creators.
It's 2025.
2025 is the year of creators stepping into CEO mode and considering themselves as business owners.
I love it. And that's why, and I'm genuinely not just saying this for the sake of it, what you do is so needed. Because like you said, for those that are on your roster, great, they have a lot of support doing that. But for creators that aren't signed, you know, that's such a challenge for them to try and do all of the like on the business stuff kind of completely unaware. And I think that's where like this podcast and your non-exclusive roster and like all of the support you give is so needed, because it's helping them to kind of work out how to step into that role. No one becomes a creator thinking they're going to need to also be a CEO.
Alice, thank you so much. This has been so valuable. Can you tell our followers and listeners where they can find you?
Absolutely. So my main hangout's probably Instagram. So Alice_Benham. My podcast is hundreds of episodes of various business and goal setting chat, and that's called Starting the Conversation. And I've also got a load of resources on my website to help with this. I could set up a little TBH discount code if you want, for anyone that
gorgeous
wants some resources. Okay, let's make it up on the spot. TBH goals.
Yeah.
Link in the show notes if people want any more help.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to the bonus episode of Lifting the Lid. I hope that sets off your January as it should. 2025 is going to be the year of creators seeing themselves as the CEOs that they truly are. As you know, this was a bonus episode, so we're now taking a break in January. But you can go back and listen to all the previous episodes that are on Spotify, on YouTube. Just search Lifting the Lid Pod to find us, or TBH Talent. And make sure to share on socials and give us some love if you want us to come back for season 2.
Bye.